Poor routine is a bit of a paradox. It should be natural to choose a healthy routine, a healthy diet, a healthy lifestyle only. So where do poor routines come from? Hi, my name is John Immel, and I'm the director of the Joyful Belly School of Ayurveda. First, let's go over some poor routines. We can start with poor cleanliness routines. You know the picture. A floor full of dirty laundry, a sink full of dirty dishes, not showering regularly, a cluttered desktop or a junk drawer. Or what about poor diet routines? Watching a late night movie on TV and then having to drink coffee the next morning because you're too exhausted. Or having a high stress job where every night you need or feel like you need a glass of wine just to unwind. Or having a really busy lifestyle and then rushing around for dinner, getting fast food, pizza, having too few vegetables just for convenience. Or even traditions. Traditions can cause a poor diet routine, such as eating treats over the holidays. One of the biggest factors in having a poor routine is a career. A person's job is very commonly the cause of a poor routine. A person might be sitting down all day at work, not getting enough exercise, not getting enough sunlight, coming home from work after dark, particularly in the winter, and also the phenomenon of living to work instead of working to live. Eating, rushing through meals while sitting in front of the computer. All that can be a cause of a poor diet routine. Even social life can cause a poor routine. A person working too hard that they forget to show love to the people in their life, or even just forget that that's important. Or a person who gets together with friends every night after work at the bar. A person who's lonely and eating mindlessly in front of the TV are all different ways that our social life can contribute to poor diet. But let's go a little bit deeper into why it's hard to stick to a habit. Why isn't it easy for us to make good decisions about our work life and leisure life? Why isn't it easy to make good decisions about our diet or to keep the room clean? Perhaps the most obvious answer is that the habit may not be enjoyable to you, that the habit might feel difficult. And so after a few weeks, enthusiasm begins to flag and there's a lack of motivation, and there's something else that you enjoy more that's competing for attention. Well, when this happens, it's a good point to take a moment and contemplate. What does make you happy? Not just right now, but what will make or give you a happy life, right? You see, we don't just want happiness for a moment. We want stable, enduring happiness that will last. So if you find it hard to stick to some good habits, you can just take a seat and contemplate a bit. What is true happiness to you? And that will help you connect to something about the habit that you enjoy. What is it about cleaning that you enjoy? Maybe it's just the fruit of having a clean house. And having a clean house means having an organized life. And that means success and peace and harmony in your life. Whatever it is, if you're having trouble enjoying those habits, enjoying the process itself, it's a good time to contemplate. Another reason why it's hard to stick to a habit is that there are too many distractions in the way. So see where you can simplify. Another reason why it's hard to stick to a habit is sometimes people try too hard and start too many new habits at once. Habits don't work that way. You build habits one at a time, and you integrate them into the rest of your life, and then you move forward. Sometimes a sudden routine will knock a person off their schedule and off their habit. This can happen if there's a health event. Suppose someone in your family has to go to the hospital and there's a week where everything's upside down and then your routine is upside down and then it's hard to get back into it. Or you go on vacation. This is a big one. Actually, I recommend that people are careful when they go on vacations to write down their routine and the essential components of their routine so that when they come home, they can pick up where they left off. Another good tip is to set a phone alarm each week to review your essential routine. That way, if you forgot something, you can pick it back up and get back on the saddle. Another reason why it's hard to stick to a habit is people feel like a failure when they make a mistake or go against the habit for a few days, or eat bad food for a few days and then they give up. And I want to mention that perfection is always difficult, but it's always good to have perfect goals, right? Having perfect goals doesn't mean that we beat ourselves up for not achieving them. We want to keep our eye on perfection, even as we're forgiving of ourselves for not achieving that perfection. With a habit, you always want to look forward, not back. Nobody's keeping score, right? Habits are about identifying the best you can be and taking a step towards that every single day. So in your habit, focus on starting, not on where you've been, but where you're going. Sometimes it's hard to stick to a habit because other people are discouraging or tempting you. And I'll just give an example there, is that I was working with a client who was trying to kick a coffee addiction. And she was having trouble because her spouse and her like to drink coffee together. And she even told me that the only time my husband and I get restful connection time each day is over that cup of coffee. So here, in a way, she had the feeling that her entire marriage was hinging on this cup of coffee. Well, that makes it really difficult to give up that cup of coffee, right? So what do? Well, in this case, I recommended that she simply use a coffee substitute and or almond chai so that she could participate in the ritual without hurting her body. So let's review these for a second, because I think this is important before we continue on and go just a little bit deeper. The reasons why it can be hard, in summary, to stick to a habit is not enjoying the habit or losing sight of that happy fruit of the habit. Too many distractions in the way, trying too hard to start too many habits at once, a sudden routine change knocking you off schedule, or feeling like a failure and giving up, or other people are discouraging or tempting you. Now let's go a little deeper. What attracts a person to an unnatural routine in the first place? And here I'm going to talk about two different types. One, involuntary, circumstances beyond your control, and the other, willful choices to a bad routine. So involuntary choices first. Poor routine due to unavoidable circumstances. This is when a person has limited or no control over their current circumstances. Perhaps you have a job with a crazy schedule and you can't quit that job because you have financial responsibilities. Or if you're caring for somebody else and that person's totally dependent on you, you might not have the ability to choose your own routine. I mean, this is really frequently, this happens, especially for moms taking care of newborns, or people taking care of an aging parent. Or if you're bonded to somebody with a poor routine and you're frequently tempted, that's going to be, the temptation is unavoidable, even though it may if you have, this superhuman strength, you may be able to, or just simple good human strength, you may be able to resist that temptation. But it's harder if you can't avoid the temptation itself. If you're dependent on other people, you might be dependent on their routine. My kids are dependent on me. In some respects, they kind of have to follow my routine, right? Although I try to choose something that's fair for the whole family. If a person has a mental disorder or an addictive habit that's hard to break, those can be, make the routine less voluntary or give the person less control over their routine. And some of these can be just victim of fate, an accident causing some kind of condition where you're dependent on others, or growing up with a poor routine, so you have these deep-seated habits that are difficult to change, etc. And sometimes people are simply victims of past choices. They started smoking when they were a teenager, and they're finding it difficult to quit now. That kind of thing. Or making some poor choices in life, and then, not quite having the job that could be the one that would give you that maximum flexibility. So it's rare that a person has zero control or agency over their future, however. And sometimes, again, it's these conflicting priorities. You love the person you're caring for, and we can't just always uproot our whole life. But that doesn't mean we have zero control or zero agency. It's always good to take an inventory of opportunities, the opportunities we have to improve in any one area of our life. And we can always contemplate root causes too. How did things get to this point? Is there something we can do to better the situation? Change is always difficult. It's always easy to say, well, it's just impossible. And whenever my client uses the word just in that way, I always press a little deeper, because 9 times out of 10, they're glossing over something because it may be painful to think about. And that's the reality that we find ourselves in. And then we have to go into a little bit deeper introspection and see what we can find, what opportunities we can find. Okay, so that's where a person has limited control, right? It said that we're going to go deeper and talk about what attracts a person, or why does a person continue with an unnatural routine? Sometimes it's unavoidable circumstances. Sometimes it's willful choice. Let's look at the willful choice. And I have a picture here of a broken glass because as a symbol of sabotage or self-sabotage, right? And so this is where that paradox I mentioned earlier. Like, why would someone voluntarily make an unhealthy choice? And we all do this all the time. This is actually the more common of the two. The involuntary circumstances is the lesser common, but this one, willful choice, is the more common. And I'm going to say that not just for my clients, but also for myself. I'm in this boat, right? We all do things that we know are ultimately not the best for us, but we do them anyway. And so that should be a point of deep humility, right? That should be a point that brings us to say, wow, I should be a very humble person, right? Okay. So why would someone voluntarily make an unhealthy choice? Well, first I would just want to start with a definition. The will, a definition of the will. This is something that, you can read a lot about in, medieval history and all that. This talk about the will. And what is the will? The will is known as the rational appetite. It's our choosing organ. It's our wishing organ. It's the organ that says, wow, I really want that, and I think that will be good for me, right? And a little bit different than, say, just being hungry and wanting to eat food, because the will is the thing that decides that eating food is good for you, right? So it not only has this appetite for, not only that this appetite for food is there, or sensory pleasure is there, but that the will decides, oh yes, that will be good for my happiness. And so the will is this sort of moment to moment organ in our brain or faculty of our intelligence that says, that is what I'm going to choose right now because it's good for happiness, right? So now our will should always function perfectly, making it natural to choose great choices for ourselves. Not just great choices, but the best choice, right? The will is supposed to identify the best choice for us, and then that's what we do. Why do we do what we do moment to moment? Because we think it's the best thing to do in that moment, right? So ideally, unhealthy choices would be repugnant to the will, where we'd be like, no, I don't want that piece of chocolate cake. That's going to make me feel terrible. But then on the other hand, we have this appetite that says, ooh, that's going to be tasty, and I want that. So, I'm going to live a little, and that's going to be good for happiness right now, right? That is the inner dialogue that's happening and it makes it difficult to select that best thing. Okay, so I just want to point out something with this in this analysis that is just a little subtle, but once you get it, it's going to really help you. Okay, so the thing to recognize here is that even poor choices are chosen under the aspect of a good, right? That there's some good aspect of the chocolate cake. Wow, I'm going to live a little. Remember that statement I just made? Wow, I'm going to live a little. That's going to be tasty, right? Well, tastiness is a good, right? And living a wonderful, enjoyable life is a good thing. And so we make poor choices under the aspect of a good, even though it might be a lesser good than optimal, right? Suppose you're allergic to wheat, but you can't resist the chocolate cake. You're going to feel bad for 2 weeks for that 10 minutes of joy. And so you might say, well, it would be happier for me to not eat the chocolate cake right now in my highest intellectual knowledge. But the sensory appetite says, ooh, I really want that. And there's that conflict, okay? So even the poor choice is chosen under the aspect of a good. And this is true for all poor choices, that we choose them because we think it'll give us a benefit, but the reality is it could be self-sabotage. And that's the inner conflict, okay? So why does this happen? Why does our will make mistakes so often? And typically it's because the choice offers short-term benefits that are easy to feel, and the long-term benefits or negative consequences are difficult to feel, right? It's easier to feel the taste of the chocolate cake now than the allergic reaction that we don't have yet, right? And so this is typically the case, that poor choices have these short-term benefits that are really easy to feel, and the long-term negative consequences are hard to imagine in that moment. That you don't feel them so directly. They're more indirect. So unhealthy conveniences right now, like, okay, let's just get a pizza on the way home, folks. Right? That's a short-term benefit. Long-term benefit may be, not having enough vegetables or gaining too much weight or whatever. Okay? Avoidance of a fear. I don't want to deal with that fear right now. We'll deal with it tomorrow, right? Short-term benefit. Indulgence in a desire. I talked about the chocolate cake. I don't mean to single out chocolate cakes. I love chocolate cakes, actually, but I am allergic to wheat, so I can't eat them. But I have nothing against them. Aversion to something you don't like. It may not be a fear, but it just may be some aversion where you feel, I really don't want that, or I really don't want to deal with that. That's actually me when it comes to administrative work. I don't like to do it, but I've had to develop a habit of doing it despite that aversion. Sometimes it's truly self-sabotage, where it's like, oh yeah, well, that person made me really mad. Well, watch this. And then you do something to hurt yourself to get even with them, right? That kind of stuff happens more often than you think, right? It's like, well, okay, well, then I'm not going to go to the movies tonight because I'm mad, right? And it's really something that you could have bonded over. And so it can be, self-sabotage with a lowercase s. It doesn't have to be the big hyperbolic self-sabotages that people like to think about when we mention that word. Sometimes, it's very similarly, it's rebellion, assertive display of your freedom. Well, for goodness sake, I should be able to eat a chocolate cake, and so I'm gonna eat that chocolate cake, and don't tell me I can't, right? That's the sort of rebellion thing. And then sometimes people just want relief from a stressful day, and they're like, I need a reward. I need to reward myself today because I did such a hard day at work, etc. We could keep on going on the different ways in which people make an unhealthy choice under the aspect of a good. I don't have to deal with that fear right now, so that's a good, but the long-term consequence may be negative. So, as I mentioned, long-term effects are ignored often because they're hard to feel or involve effort. And that's why we have the national debt, right? That's why individuals have a lot of debt. Because they're like, okay, I can buy the thing now, and I'll deal with the debt later. And there you go, okay? So at the essence of all this is really, in the end, there's these short-term benefits, easy to feel, long-term negative consequences, hard to feel, and that causes these passions or appetites or desires, either passions to avoid something or passion to have something, kind of distract the will or unsettle the will and make it difficult to establish clear priorities. What's my priority? Living life well today or losing weight? Which one of those is my highest priority, right? The will is supposed to order everything into a nice, neat prioritization, but that gets unsettled and distracted, and the will becomes moved by a passion towards a short-term desire instead of focusing on those long-term best decisions. All right, I'm giving you some real technical details here, which are embedded deeply in both Western medieval philosophy, and also you can find in Eastern philosophical discourse on desire and aversion. And there's differences in the Western tradition and Eastern tradition, but nevertheless, this is where I'm referring to here with some of these technical details. So when I say, over prioritizing something or under prioritizing something, I'm not just talking about chocolate cake and whether to eat it now or not eat it now. This shows up in many subtle ways. And Rachel, who is our program coordinator, said that, gave one of her examples is that owning a business, she tends to prioritize her clients' needs and schedules and then ends up working constantly with lots of interruptions and has a difficult time fully completing tasks, remembering to stop and eat or even to take a break. And when she feels scatters like this, she says, I'm not as useful to my clients, right? So here you see that her priority ends up compromising the level of service that she can provide. And so it backfires. That's otherwise known as a backfire. And another example of this is mothers that don't take care of themselves because they're taking care of the people that she loves, but then that causing stress or not eating enough. I mean, I see this with my wife. She's taking care of the kids on some days, and she's just so enveloped and even enjoys taking care of them so much that sometimes she's like fed them but hasn't eaten, and then she can that can make her feel anxious or even irritable or something like that, and what she really needs to do in that moment is stop just for a minute, make sure she's well taken care of so she can be the best that she can be. And we all have our own variety of this. And so what we want to do is take a step back. Again, a lot of this with routine comes back to a bit of contemplation. contemplation so that we can reorganize our will, reorganize our priorities and our tasks, and remember what true happiness is, right? What's going to create that lasting, enduring happiness, not just the momentary self-gratification, quick and easy gratification, instant gratification, but what's going to create enduring happiness. And that is going to create, keep your eye on the prize. That's going to keep you focused and keep your priorities ordered so that you can easily make those habits happen. Right? So here's a few questions for contemplation. You can hit the pause button and write down your answer to these, because I think that is going to give you lots of good fruit and lots of great opportunities for self-improvement. So how do incorrect priorities happen for you? Right? For me, I just get super excited about giving people truths that make them feel well, right? That give them health and wellness. I love doing that. I love helping people sort out the problems in their life. So I'm constantly trying to dig deeper, reading the medieval textbooks, reading the Ayurveda textbooks, reading wisdom traditions to bring that knowledge to the public. And then the gutters haven't been cleaned around the house, right? This is the way it goes, right? You can't be passionate about every single thing. So, all right. So how do incorrect priorities happen for you? Next question. In what areas of your life do you feel your priorities are disordered? In fact, I'm going to switch those two questions around. I should have asked the first question first and the second question second, because the first is, where are your priorities disordered? And the second question should be, how did that happen? And then the third natural question is, how do you reestablish the correct priorities? All right. So this is where this is all in the section on poor routine due to willful choice, right? And so, and this first kind of whole type or example is where a passion to avoid something or a passion to have something causes conflicts in priorities, and our priorities get disordered. There is another type of willfulness, though, which is willful ignorance. And this shows up a lot. I've had a lot of clients who don't want to know why something is not good for them. And we see this all the time. This is especially true for family members, right? If you talk to family members and you're like, hey, you shouldn't be doing that. And they're like, who asked you for advice, right? That's, and so the people we love in our life, they don't want to know always. And maybe it's just that they don't want to know from you. But lots of people in general just don't want to hear it, right? And that's the blind eye, a refusal to consider, refusal to know. And that can be a little bit difficult in the context of a consultation, because I've had clients do that. And then here's the wonderful question that always gets around that. And I'm giving this for our students that are in our professional certification programs, is you just ask the client, how do you want me to help you? And as soon as you do that, it totally disarms that, because then they have to identify the area that they're open-minded, right? Then they have to identify the area where they do want to know. They're coming to you, they're paying for the service. So they have some level of open-mindedness, but you'd be surprised about how much pushback you can get. Sometimes it's just negligence for people. It's not a refusal, but it's just a lack of effort. Hey, I want you to tell me instead of having to research it myself. Great, that's why they're paying you. This is fine. Involuntary, maybe just that they didn't even know that they don't know, right? So there's some areas where I put this under the section of poor routine due to willful choice, but really only negligence and the blind eye are willful. The first one, where you don't know that you don't know, is a bit, could properly belong in the involuntary section. Okay. All right, so we've gone down the rabbit hole and discussed some particular details about how routine gets knocked our good routine, we get knocked off our good routine, and we end up with an unhealthy routine. And due to our passions to avoid or our passion to have and or involuntary circumstances. I want to just go over a few more involuntary circumstances. A person might have a job with shift work and that they can't quit. I always recommend if you have shift work and it's not just your total mission to do that job, and you have the financial means to get a different job, then quit your shift work job, because that is very unhealthy to have a shift work. And I'm going to do a whole video on shift work. Sometimes people have two jobs with opposite hours, where Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, they're working from, 4 to midnight, 4 p.m. to midnight. But then Thursday, Friday, they work from 8 to 4 p.m. or something, right? So then there's two jobs with opposite hours. Basically, that's shift work. So you want to limit that. Flight attendant, going to different time zones all the time. Even if the hours were regular, you're just getting scrambled because of time zone issues. And that's also like shift work. That can make routine seem really impossible, or actually be impossible. And like I said, I'm going to give a whole presentation on this circumstance. So watch for that. But here's the thing. For every degree of irregularity in your life, you have to add regularity somewhere else. If you can't have a regular diet, then you have to have a regular schedule. If you can't have a regular schedule, have a regular diet. Or create regularity somewhere in your social life, etc. Okay? And that will be helpful for you. I also want to talk about some contraindications of routine, okay? Because I've talked a lot about how... so far about how to have a good routine, but there's also a point where people get too focused on routine and too rigid, and there's also points where you really shouldn't try to impose a routine. And the first example where you shouldn't try to impose too strict a routine is on a nursing mom. Right? On-demand nursing keeps up milk supply and establishes a strong bond between mother and baby. And so a mom may not be able to get 8 hours of sleep straight back to back. And you could pump in advance. That may help. But the fact is you're not going to have that strong bond, and your milk supply will drop if you're not nursing through the night. So then what does that mean? You may need to sleep and eat wherever you can. So there's this degree of irregularity. That may mean irregularity somewhere. That may mean you have to add regularity somewhere else, such as taking some time off from a job, etc. Young children are growing and changing a lot. If you try to impose too strict of a routine on them, it might not fit them. They may need more snacks. But our kids don't. I just want to say that there's like this snack craze around children, which I don't know. I don't really think is always healthy. Our bodies can handle going for a few hours without food, even a child. But it does depend on the child, and if your child really wants a snack, etc. I'm not saying that you should deny them. I'm just saying that we've gotten a little crazy with the snacks, it seems, in our culture lately. Similarly with elders, they're maybe a little more fragile. Their health, they could have changing health. They might need extra rest or to skip a meal, etc. So it's good to have an intention of keeping a routine, but in particular circumstances, it can be better to give up the routine. In fact, it's having a routine that allows you to have such a solid foundation in your life that you can be flexible, right? A routine does not create a reduction in flexibility, but an increase. Because if you don't have a routine, you could say, wow, I'm super flexible. I don't even have a routine. But that creates fragile health and ultimately backfires, right? We want to have the right amount of a routine so we have solid foundation that we can accommodate change and adverse events in our life, and that we don't get shooken up too much, okay? So, so sometimes we're gonna let the sleeping baby lie, even though they're sleeping off their routine. My son, John, 1.5 years old, fell asleep in his high chair while he was eating his Cheerios. we just let them have a nap, impromptu nap. That's okay. But, what's not okay is being so strict and rigid about your routine that you cause more harm than good. All right. So, yeah, we all know people who are just so rigid with their routine that you can't even, meet them for dinner, right? Because they have such a structure that they're stuck in, and that may not even be good for social life. Okay, so another thing that I want to say about some people's routine that can be excessively rigid is that, and I see this a lot. I love my clients; they're so enthusiastic about Ayurveda and having a perfect health routine, but that can also lead to vanity and excessive self-focus. Our body is amazingly resilient. Our body actually doesn't demand perfection of us. We have to have the basics all lined up, right? And we should try hard, but we don't. Our body does not demand perfection of us. Okay, so when it comes to there's a point where we have to ask ourselves: is my routine the most important thing in life? Or are there starving children in the world that I could give a little bit more to? Sometimes it's better to care for other people than to just maintain your own routine. And a good routine, or the ideal routine, will help you stay healthy, and that will give you the strength to care for other people, right? Any case, we want to keep all this in balance. All right, so I've talked about, in summary, I've talked about when routine is too rigid. I've talked a little bit about when routine is even contraindicated in nursing mothers, very young children, or the elderly. I've talked about involuntary circumstances that can cause poor routine, and also willful choice to a poor routine. I've also talked about, some various reasons why it's difficult to stick to a habit. And I went over, if you remember, some examples of poor routine in the areas of cleanliness, diet, job, and in your social life. So I want to end with this point that, or with letting you know that if you have a client and they have a poor routine, and it's because of some willful choice they're making, there's no point in lecturing them, right? Like, if I have a client that comes in and they're trying to lose weight, and I'm like, oh, what's your diet like? They're like, well, I eat ice cream every day. Well, I'm not going to just say, don't do that. My clients already know that they shouldn't be eating ice cream, right? They already know that they need more exercise, or more sunlight, or to work less, or that they should have a bit more vegetables. So I don't want to be the broken record. I don't want to lecture them. Instead, I want to be smarter than that. I want to find the root cause. So instead of saying, hey, well, you shouldn't be eating ice cream, that's going to aggravate your kapha dosha, your kapha body type, I'm going to say, hey, why are you eating ice cream every day, right? And then, we can find the root of the non-compliance, the root of that willful self-sabotage, and address it there. That's where you're going to see more results, all right? And then I'm going to give you a bunch of tips in the next video of a poor routine. So stay tuned for that. Thanks, folks.